in the rule adopted in November of 2012, which is 180-18040. It's on page 167 of your board packet. And for waiver applications and for renewals of waivers, those criteria are spelled out, are described there. It's a very long process that the board went through in developing those rules. I'd be the last to say that this is the final word ever on what criteria for evaluation of waivers are, but the board is required to evaluate the need for the waiver, the merits, the benefits of the waiver, based on the criteria here. And in your board packet, we provided a worksheet to say, yes, well, it meets this criteria, no, it doesn't, it's good at this, no, it isn't, and a reasonable person can disagree on the criteria there, but it's important, if I'm at liberty to say, that the board demonstrate that it is making its decisions based on the criteria in rule, because if it isn't, that it is acting outside our own rules.
Sorry, one more technical question. Judy, and then we'll go to the.
I may have missed this, but on page 160, it talks about the bargaining agreement.
Can you talk into
Oh,
the
I'm
mic,
sorry.
please?
On page 160, it talks a bit about the bargaining agreement. I may have just missed this, but it calls for 4 conference days. How does that fit into all of this?
Well, the bargaining agreement,
I guess my question is it part of the 176? It doesn't appear to be part of the 4, and the work days, the 2 work days don't appear to be conference days. So that's my question.
well, with your leave, Board Member Jennings, I'll go into the collective bargaining agreement.
Great.
See if I can identify how those are used. The collective bargaining agreement information is included in the application documents because it's a question that members ask, but very frankly, it is not, there are not questions about the collective bargaining agreement in rule.
Right.
So I think that's an important thing to note.
I was just focused on how it fits into the time. That's my question, how does it fit into the time allotments?
So how many student instructional days?
Right.
Doesn't impact the.
Okay, let me, I will look at that, I will look at the agreement to see if I can identify clearly how that works in the agreement.
Great, go ahead.
Okay, well, with that, we will move on to the application for an option 2, economy and efficiency waiver that we have from Patterson School District. There is a representative from Patterson here, and I believe he will be here tomorrow, Superintendent Seaton. The application begins on page 170 of your packet. A few of the current members of the board will recall that in March of 2012, the board granted renewal of the 180-day waiver for purposes of economy and efficiency that was originally granted to Patterson in 2009 for another 3 years. I remember that because that was my first heavy-duty meeting, as a matter of fact, so historic for me and for Patterson. On page 132 of your packet, we provide a history of the option 2 waiver. That includes the legislatively directed report the state board had to make to recommend whether the program should be continued, and the legislation passed in 2014 by the legislature that extended the program through the 2016-17 school year. So I won't walk through that, but the option 2 was quite a different waiver with different criteria and different bases from the traditional waiver, such as we discussed just now. At the March meeting of this year, you approved the request by Bickleton School District to renew its waiver of 30 days for the next 2 years. At this meeting, Patterson requests renewal of its waiver of 34 days. The application document actually requests renewal for 3 years, but the authority for the waiver only exists for another 2, so this is effectively a request to extend for 2 years. Summarizing the application briefly, Patterson operates on a 4-day school week, like Pickleton, with longer school days. The calendar and daily schedule for Pickleton are on pages 187 and 188 of your packet. Certain Fridays during the school year, those dates are to be determined still for the next 2 years, are designated Adventure Fridays. And on Adventure Fridays, Patterson, these are days in which schools are not, where students are not required to attend, but may attend for various enrichment activities, such as, for example, science fairs and engineering and science activities are some of those that Patterson proposes to conduct during those Adventure Fridays. Actually are doing during the current waiver term. And Fridays are also used for staff meetings, professional development, sometimes assistance for individual students. 2, and time after the regular school day from 3:45 to 4:30 p.m. is used for extended day activities as well as for help for individual students. These are economy and efficiency waivers, and the original purpose was to permit small, usually spread out rural school districts to be able to save money in their operations by operating on a modified calendar and schedule. In that table on page 171, Patterson shows their estimated savings in various objects of expenditure for 2013-14. As you can see, for that year, estimated savings were in the neighborhood of $49,000. Somewhere I noted what the entire budget of the district is, but I don't have that number right here in front of me. You can see from that about 61% of those estimated savings were for classified staff, for not operating on Fridays, food service staff, transportation staff, or the classified staff. The next largest savings was in substitute teachers, because on the 4-day schedule, teachers are out less than during the traditional 5-day schedule. Transportation savings shown are quite small, and this is a very muddy area for estimating savings. And Ben and I, and Julie and I have talked about this extensively, and I wonder if that's the whole area of cost and savings, the transportation area is one we might not defer to the discussion tomorrow, because that's a bit of a talker. But I'll be glad, of course, to take any questions on them. Patterson does not in the application project what savings would be for the next 2 years under the waiver. My assumption is that the estimated savings in 2013-14 are presented as illustrative of what their savings would be in the next 2 years as well. As in the last application from Patterson, the academic benefits that are claimed from the savings, from the modified calendar and school schedule, really seems to outweigh the financial benefits from it. And maybe that's not true, and Superintendent Seaton will tell me otherwise on that. But as I read the application, that's really what I derive from it. Some of the academic benefits that are identified and discussed in the application include longer blocks of time for instruction than under the usual school day, and teachers and administrators state in the application that the longer blocks of time for lessons result in higher quality instruction than the usual 40-minute, 45-minute periods, and that student learning benefits from those longer class blocks. Reduced use of substitutes by the district, which I mentioned in relation to savings just now. Time set aside after the school day for interventions and assistance with individual students that need help. They also speak of less interruptions during the school day for field trips, athletics, things like this, because they try to do those activities on Fridays or on Saturdays. And they state that student absenteeism has declined under this too. Part of the reason for that, they state, is that in a very spread out rural district such as Patterson, children and their parents often have to, for example, drive a long way to get to the doctor or the dentist or what have you. They lose time during school, lose days during school for this, and Fridays can be used to schedule appointments of that kind. They also say that their discipline problems are reduced under the shorter week and the longer school day too. And last, I want to bring your attention to the to Appendix C, which begins on page 191 of your district, where Patterson provides demographic and student achievement data to support its request for renewal of its option 2 waiver. We're not going to walk through each one of these, but what they show, for example, in the charts that begin on page 193, they show a comparison between the performance of Patterson students on the high school algebra EOC. These are middle school students taking the high school algebra EOC, compared with performance of similar schools in the Yakima Valley, similar in terms of demographics. They call these their feeder schools because they tend to draw students from these other districts and schools. They show in a table here a longitudinal look on what the progress of Patterson students have been in reading and math MSPs. Two showing uneven but mostly improved assessment results on math and reading during the time that the modified calendar has been in effect. And those run from the class of 2013 through the class of 2019. Data are suppressed for some years because of the small number there. They also show, pages 196, 197, a comparison of MSP results in the springs of 2013 and 2014 with these feeder schools, similar Yakima Valley schools, as well as comparison with the state results. The results from Patterson are generally impressive in the comparisons that they show here. And last, Patterson provided letters of support for their modified calendar from teachers and parents and students, and those are in your online packet. They're not included in the printed packet that you have because they take up too much space. But this seems to, the calendar seems to have become part of the rhythm of life in Patterson since 2009. The criteria for evaluation is WAC 180-16065, also adopted in November of 2012. That's on page 200 of your packet. The criteria are basically, does the district provide the information that's spelled out in the statute? The statute is very detailed as to what these applications must have in them. So with that, I'll conclude.
So different criteria.
Very different criteria from the option 1, and established not by the board through rule, but by the legislature and statute.
Technical questions. Yeah.
Very simple. Remind me when this sunsets again in the legislature.
2017.
27.
August 31st, 2017.
Deborah and then.
This doesn't directly impact the decision around Patterson, but there's 5 schools, according to the legislation, up to enrollment of 150 that can get this type of waiver, and then I think another 2 or 3 between 150 and 500. Do we have, are all of those waivers, allocated, have we granted, oh, okay, huh?
No,
So
they
it's-
haven't, these are the only two,
Oh, only two,
and they are
okay.
both in the one under 150 enrollment
Right, okay.
category. There can be two of these so far are them, there can be three between 150 and 500 enrollment. There's only been one application for the larger enrollment group, that was for Lyle. It was granted after a couple of years. Lyle decided not to continue on that calendar, and there have been no others.
Holly?
This might be a question, you said there's gonna be a representative from the district here tomorrow. Might be something for them to think about ahead of time, thinking about the cost savings, that they may not have thought about representing, you know, with the pressure of NGSS and Common Core and TPAP. You know, there may be some savings that you would have seen some bargained pressure to provide days in addition to the calendar, for PD that's happening on those Fridays. And I'm curious if they have additionally bargained PD days, or if this has allowed them some flexibility to train their teachers. That would be a cost savings. And then also thinking about the cost savings in time in terms of extended learning opportunities. What have they been able to take advantage of with outside resources that they wouldn't have been able to without that time?
Yeah,
Like in-kind savings, right?
that'd be a good question for the district. And some of the criteria, I'm going on without being asked, things the legislature was concerned about is would childcare be a problem if kids aren't in school on Friday? Would child nutrition services be jeopardized under this? The legislature was, thinking about those after effects, those consequences, and Patterson responds on each of them in the application document.
Great, so we're gonna have more time tomorrow to talk about the applications. Thanks, Jack. We're gonna take about 5 minutes just to